The Loner, Trail of Blood, Chapter 15 and 16. Conrad and Arturo checked out of the hotel and headed for the train station early the next morning. Now that he was ready to take up the trail again, Conrad didn't want to risk being delayed in any way. Harcourt met them at the station. I've engaged Mallory to see what he can find out about Pamela Tollington's maid or nanny or whatever you want to call her. How can I get in touch with you if I have any information, Conrad? I'm afraid I don't know where I'll be other than in Kansas City a couple of days from now. Conrad shook his head. I'll wire you when we get there, Charles, and I'll stay in touch by telegraph whenever it looks like we're going to be in one place long enough to make that practical. All right. Harcourt held out his hand. Good luck in your search. Don't hesitate to let me know if there's anything I can do to help. Conrad had engaged a Pullman compartment for himself and Arturo rather than taking his private car. He might need to make a connection in a hurry somewhere, and having the private car hooked up to a train always took quite a bit of time. They boarded the train and settled in for the trip to Chicago and then Kansas City. Conrad knew it would be difficult to find out where Pamela had gone from Kansas City, but he carried considerable influence with the railroad. Any records that might still exist would be 3 years old, but he intended to have a look at all of them. If Pamela had paid cash for her and the maid's tickets, there would be no record of her name. On the other hand, Pamela's beauty and her imperious attitude made her easy to remember. Conrad held on to the hope that someone connected to the railroad might recall her and even remember where she had been going. He wore the shoulder harness for the two Colt Lightnings again and didn't intend to be without them during the journey. The civilized East had proven to be just about as dangerous as the so-called uncivilized West. Arturo brought him a light lunch from the dining car, but by the time evening rolled around, Conrad wanted an actual meal. He announced his intention to walk up to the dining car for supper. Join me, Arturo. That would hardly be appropriate, sir, Arturo said with a frown and a shake of his head. You're my employer. I know that, but I consider you a friend as well. But I don't consider you a friend, Arturo said stubbornly. You're my employer. He repeated as if that explained everything. Maybe it did for some people, but Conrad had spent too much time around Frank, Rebel, and other Westerners to worry about false distinctions like that. Come on, I'll make it in order if I have to. Arturo sighed. Very well. Are you going to order me to enjoy myself as well? I just might, Conrad said with a grin. Well, in that case, I shall do my best to comply. Arturo pasted an artificial-looking smile on his face. Two regular passenger cars were between the dining car and the Pullman where Conrad's compartment was. He and Arturo walked through the passenger cars and were soon seated at a table in a dining car, where a white-jacketed waiter brought them a bottle of wine and a couple of steaks with numerous trimmings. The railroads were noted for their cuisine, and Conrad thought the food was all right. A big prairie hen roasted over an open fire, but not by much, he decided. Of course, on the trail he'd be washing down his mail with water from a creek or his canteen, not a decent bottle of Chateau Fargas. The train was traveling through western New York on its way to Pennsylvania. Outside the windows all was dark except for occasional lights from a farmhouse or a small town. As always, the combination of food, wine, and the regular rhythm of the rails began to make Conrad sleepy. It was early yet, but he had a busy few days in Boston. He patted his lips with his napkin and said, I think I'm going to turn in. A splendid idea, sir, Arturo said. He had relaxed some during the meal and seemed to enjoy it. I'll prepare your berth as soon as we get back to the compartment. In fact, if you care to wait here for a few minutes, I'll go ahead and have it ready for you when you get there." Conrad picked up the bottle, which had a little wine left in it. "All right, that's a good idea. I'll just finish this off and then scroll back to the pool man." "Excellent." Arturo got to his feet and hesitated. "Thank you, sir." "What for?" Conrad asked with a smile. "For the fine meal and for saying, that we're friends?" Conrad chuckled. "Don't worry about it. Once you spend more time west of the Mississippi, you'll understand. I suspect that I won't, but I appreciate the sentiment anyway." Looking vaguely embarrassed by the show of any emotion, Arturo quickly left the dining car and headed back to the pool man. Conrad took his time lingering over the last of the wine. When he finally finished it off, he scrawled his name on the bill the waiter had left and stood up. As he walked through the passenger cars, he was aware of the looks people were giving him. Some of the men appeared to be openly resentful of his youth, his good looks, his obvious wealth. The women, on the other hand, were more circumspect in their glances, which were frankly approving. Some of the younger women even had bold invitation in their eyes as Conrad passed. Any time anyone, male or female, caught his eye, he smiled, nodded, and moved on. He had finally moved far enough past Rebel's death that he could be attracted to a woman again without feeling too guilty about it. The striking red-headed bounty hunter, Lace McCall, had made him realize that. But the matter of his missing children had come up, and he had shoved everything else to the back of his mind. He didn't have time for anything except the quest to find his stolen son and daughter. He would see Lace again one of these days, he promised himself as he stepped through the vestibule of the second passenger and onto its platform. One of these days. The shape came out of the darkness and slammed into him with terrific force, knocking him sideways. The impact rammed his hip against the railing around the platform, and his momentum nearly carried him over it. He caught a bare glimpse of the ground, rushing past beneath him as the train rocked along at a mile-a-minute clip. His hand shot out and grabbed the railing. He felt himself flip completely over in the air, heels over head as he fell. Maintaining his grip on the rail, he hung by one hand with his feet dangling mere inches above the roadbed. Grunting with the effort, he reached up with his other hand and managed to clamp it onto the rail. The shape of a man on the platform loomed over him, then laughed. "Did you think you could get away with what you did to me, Browning? Did you really?" As Conrad gritted his teeth in the effort to hang on, he recognized Eddie Murtaugh's voice. He didn't know where Murtaugh had come from. He would have sworn the platform was empty when he stepped out of the passenger car's vestibule. "I don't care about that taller-than bitch or those little bastards of hers," Murtaugh went on. "It's personal now. You came into Sereno's and killed my friends. You tried to kill me. You will pay for that." Murtaugh must have been on top of the car, Conrad thought. He had waited for his intended victim to come along and then swung down from the roof, kicking Conrad and nearly knocking him all the way off the train. Through clenched teeth, Conrad said, "I made you beg for your life, too. That's what you can't swallow." "Go to hell," Murtaugh snapped. A light from somewhere glinted briefly on the blade of a big knife he held in his hand. "We'll see how long you can hang on once I start sawing your fingers off." Conrad knew he couldn't hang on. He was about to let go with one hand and reach under his coat for one of the revolvers in the shoulder harness, an awkward, risky move he probably couldn't complete before that blade came chopping down into his fingers. And when more light suddenly spilled over the platform and the farrier's voice shouted, "Get away from him!" Arturo lunged across the gap between cars from the platform of the pool man. Murtaugh whirled toward him and thrust out the heavy-bladed knife. Arturo grabbed the gang leader's wrist with both hands and twisted, keeping Murtaugh from sinking that cold steel into his belly. Murtaugh cursed and crashed his left fist into Arturo's face. Conrad knew Arturo didn't stand a chance against Murtaugh and wouldn't be able to hold him off for more than a few seconds. Those few seconds were precious, giving Conrad time to pour all his strength into his arms and shoulders and heave himself up far enough that he could hook a leg over the villain. With a grunt of effort, he swung over the rail and sprawled onto the platform, pulling him in a good position to grab Murtaugh's knees and pull the man's legs out from under him, just as he tore free of Arturo's grip and slashed the knife at the servant's face. With a yell of surprise, Murtaugh toppled over backward, and a knife stroke missed. Conrad clambered up the man's body, grabbed Murtaugh's wrist, and slammed his knife hand against the edge of the platform. Murtaugh yelled again as his fingers opened involuntarily, and the knife went flying away into the dark. Murtaugh brought a knee up sharply, aiming to bury it in Conrad's groin. Conrad twisted aside and took the blow on his thigh. His left hand caught hold of Murtaugh's throat. His right balled into a fist that he brought down with stunning force into Murtaugh's face. The blow wasn't strong enough to knock all the fight out of the man. He brought the heel of his hand up under Conrad's chin, forcing his head back and making him loosen his grip on Murtaugh's throat. Proving as hard to hang on to as he had in their previous battle, Murtaugh weaved away and aimed a kick at Conrad's head. The kick landed on his left shoulder, making Conrad's arm go numb. He struggled to get up while Murtaugh scrambled nimbly to his feet. Before Murtaugh could do anything else, Arturo went after him, swinging wild punches. "Arturo, no!" Conrad yelled. The servant was no match for a brawler like Murtaugh, who proved that by easily blocking the valet's blows and throwing a punch of his own that rocked Arturo's head back. Stumbling backwards, he cried out in horror and toppled off the platform, falling into the gap between the cars. "No!" Conrad bellowed again as he surged up. Curling his right hand in a fist, he hammered a punch into Murtaugh's face, then another and another, driving Murtaugh toward the villain at the side of the platform. Conrad bowled into him, using his superior size and strength to pin Murtaugh against the villain. The numbness in his left arm was wearing on, so he locked both hands around Murtaugh's throat, forcing the man further and further back, bending him over the villain in a way the human spine wasn't meant to bend. Murtaugh punched and kicked and gouged, but Conrad shrugged it all off and never loosened his grip. Murtaugh's wide, terrified eyes stared up at him out of a sweat-slick face. Even over the loud rumble of the train's wheels on the rails, he heard the sharp crack of Eddie Murtaugh's back breaking. Conrad let go of his neck. Murtaugh screamed once, a hoarse scream that died away in a whimpering moan. Conrad bent, took hold of Murtaugh's useless legs and lifted. Murtaugh screamed again as he realized he was going over the villain. Conrad flipped him up, over and away. Murtaugh was gone in the blink of an eye. It was only when Conrad swayed forward and gripped the rail that he saw the train was passing over a trestle high above a river. Conrad began to laugh hollowly. The fall would have killed Murtaugh even without the broken back. 3 sharp, unexpected slaps caught Conrad's attention. As he swung toward the sound, he heard Arturo's weak voice calling, "Mr. Browning?" A hand reached over the back of the platform and slapped the boards 3 more times. "Mr. Browning?" Unable to believe what he was seeing and hearing, Conrad leaped forward and leaned down to grab the wrist just as Arturo was about to knock on the platform again. Arturo's other hand had hold of the coupling between the cars, and both of the servant's legs were wrapped around an iron rod projecting from the apparatus. Conrad hauled up on Arturo's wrist and then grabbed his coat. He lifted Arturo onto the platform and threw his arms around them in a hug. I thought that bastard Murtaugh had killed you. Yes, well, it wasn't for lack of trying. Arturo was trembling all over from the strain of having to hang on for dear life as the roadbed rushed past right below him. Come on, let's get you back to the compartment. Behind Conrad, the door to the passenger car opened, and the conductor strolled out too late for all the excitement he was blissfully unaware of. Mr. Browning, he said he recognized Conrad. Something wrong? Yes, my friend here isn't feeling well, Conrad explained as he put an arm around Arturo's shoulders. I was helping him get some fresh air. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Is there anything I can do to help? Arturo said, No, thank you. I'll be fine. Perhaps if I lie down for a short time. Let me give you a hand there, Mr. Browning, the conductor offered. Between them, they got Arturo into the Pullman compartment, where he stretched out on one of the short davits that pulled out into a berth. The conductor said, Let me know if there's anything else I can do to help. Conrad nodded. I certainly will. When the man was gone, Conrad sat down on the opposite berth and asked, How did you happen to come out there just in time to save my life? I thought you would be back there sooner, Arturo explained. I just stepped out to see if you were coming. Another few seconds, and I would have been a dead man. Thanks, Arturo. I'm obliged to you. Nonsense, sir. It's my job to assist you in any way possible. Conrad laughed. It's not your job to take on cold-blooded killers, but you jumped right in anyway. Was that Mr. Murtaugh? It was, Conrad said with a nod. What happened to him? He won't bother us anymore, Conrad said, thinking about Murtaugh's broken back and the long fall from that trestle. The train rolled on, heading west into the night. Chapter 16. The bustling city of Kansas City, Missouri, sat on the border between the states of Missouri and Kansas, but it was a border town in other ways too. For years, Westport Landing, one of the frontier communities that had developed into Kansas City, had been a major jumping-off place for the wagon trains carrying immigrants to the west. Later, as civilization intended itself past the Missouri River, Kansas City had become the primary market for grain growing in the vast flat farmland surrounding the city. But it was also a cow town as the railroads brought shipments of cattle from the empire-sized ranches of Texas and elsewhere. Huge stockyards covered much of the area known as West Bottoms, just west of downtown, and you were just as likely to see cowboys walking down the street, spurs jingling, as you were to bump into sober-suited businessmen. Kansas City was the true boundary between east and west. Conrad thought as he stepped down from the train in Union Station, followed by Arturo. The servant hurried off to supervise the unloading of their luggage. Conrad set off across the crowded platform toward the station master's office. He had sent a telegram to the station master from back up the line, advising the man when to expect him. The woman who sat at the desk in the outer office recognized his name. She stood up and smiled at him. Please sit down, Mr. Browning. I'll let Mr. Crowley know you're here. Conrad noticed she was quite attractive with unswept brown hair and a fine figure that the high-neck long-sleeve dress she wore failed to conceal. Evidently, more and more women were working in business offices. The secretary came back a moment later and motioned for him to go through the door to the inner office. Mr. Crowley will see you now, she murmured. Conrad went in and shook hands with a tough-looking gray-haired man. It's good to see you again, Mr. Browning, Crowley said. We've met before? Conrad asked with a faint frown. Not exactly. I used to be a conductor, and your mother rode on my train several times. You were with her, but you were a boy, so I don't expect you to remember." Conrad smiled. "My mother traveled a lot. She had so many different business interests, and she liked to keep up with all of them as personally as she could. I imagine you're the same way." Crowley gestured toward a leather armchair in front of the desk. "Have a seat. Would you like a cigar or a drink?" "No, thanks." When both men were settled in their chairs, Crowley went on. "What can I do for you, Mr. Browning? Your wire said something about the records from 3 years ago. I'm looking for two women who would have been traveling with a pair of infants, twins. I'd like to find out where they went when they left Kansas City." The station master's forehead creased. "Two women and two children, that's all you know? And this was 3 years ago?" With a vaguely uncomfortable look, Crowley moved some papers on his desk. "You realize, of course, Mr. Browning, that thousands of passengers have come through the station since then?" Conrad suppressed the surge of irritation he felt. "Of course, but I can narrow it down to a fairly short period of time, and surely there are records of how many tickets were sold and what the destinations were." Crowley sighed. "Mr. Browning, what you ask is impossible. Yes, there are records of how many tickets were sold, but there's no way to tell which passengers bought which tickets. All we have are totals." Conrad's heart sank. He leaned his elbows on his knees and hung his head. The news was bitterly disappointing. As he mulled over the station master's words, it occurred to him perhaps there was another way, a longer shot even, than checking the railroad's records, but it might provide at least some information. He straightened in the chair. "Do you have someone who's worked here for several years? Someone who would have been here 3 years ago during the period I'm interested in?" "Yes, of course. A number of our employment have been here for a long time. If I could talk to them, ask them some questions." "Do you really think that would do any good?" Crowley asked. "Mr. Browning, with all due respect, so many people go through here I doubt if any of the employees will remember someone from last week, let alone 3 years ago. They might remember one of the women I'm looking for, but Pamela's beauty and the way she carried herself with some sort of royalty went with all the attendant arrogance and abrasiveness. She was hard to forget, or so Conrad hoped. "Certainly you can talk to them," Crowley said. "I have no objection to that at all. I just think you should be prepared for the possibility that you won't find out anything. Can you give me a list of the people who were working here 3 years ago?" The station master nodded. "Give me a couple of hours." Conrad got to his feet. "Fine. I appreciate this, Mr. Crowley." The man smiled. "I'm glad to do it. You're a major stockholder in this railroad, Mr. Browning, as your mother was before you. Should I send the list to your hotel?" "That's fine. I'll be at the Cattleman's Hotel." "All right." Crowley extended his hand across the desk. "I'm not sure exactly what you're looking for, Mr. Browning, but I wish you the best of luck in your search." The best of luck was exactly what he was going to need, Conrad thought. Arturo had engaged a buggy for the two of them and a wagon for their luggage while Conrad was talking to the station master. It didn't take long to reach the Cattleman's Hotel in downtown. With ranchers and cattle buyers making up most of its guests, Conrad thought he would feel more comfortable there than in some stuffier place. His time in the West had changed him, made him less tolerant of the artificiality that pervaded much of the East, which was not to say that the Cattleman's wasn't a nice place. The lobby was luxuriously furnished, and the dining room was famous for its steaks. The desk clerk greeted Conrad warmly and summoned bellboys to take the luggage up to the suite he reserved. As promised, A messenger delivered the list of longtime employees that Crowley sent over, but it was too late in the day to return to Union Station and start interviewing them. The next morning, Conrad used the station master's office to talk to them, but it didn't take long to realize that Crowley had been right. Even though the ticket clerks, porters, and other employees wanted to be helpful again and again, Conrad got nothing but blank looks as he described Pamela Tarleton and explained that she would have been traveling with another woman and two babies. He added that she would have been hard to please and likely would have bossed around anyone she encountered, but that didn't help. As one ticket clerk put it, we see hundreds of people a day, Mr. Browning. There's just no way to remember anything that far back. Conrad was polite, but he felt his frustration growing. When he had talked to everyone on Crowley's list, the station master came back into the office and asked, "Any luck?" Conrad slumped in a chair behind the desk and shook his head. "Not a bit. No one remembers her. I was afraid of that. I did some checking through our records just in case I might turn up something, but no luck. It's a dead end," Conrad said glumly. "The trail's too cold. There's no way to find out where she went." He looked at the list he had tossed onto the desk, and a thought occurred to him. Tapping the list, he asked, "What about people who were working here 3 years ago, but aren't now?" Crowley rubbed his jaw and frowned in thought. "Yes, there are some folks who fit that description, beginning with Ralph Potter." "Who's that?" "He ran the station before I did." Conrad sat up straighter. "Where can I find him? He's still alive, isn't he?" "Oh, yes, he's still alive. I can give you directions to his place. I don't know if he'll help you, though. Ralph can be a little difficult." "I'll take that chance," Conrad said. Now that he thought about it, the odds of Pamela having much to do with a ticket clerk or a porter was small. Given her personality, if she encountered any sort of trouble with the railroad in Kansas City, she would have gone directly to the station master to complain. Crowley explained that Ralph Potter had bought a small farm town south of town when he retired from the railroad. He told Conrad how to find her and then warned him again that Potter didn't like strangers. Conrad smiled. "I'm sure I can handle him." Still clinging to a shred of hope that the trail wasn't completely lost, Conrad left the depot and went back to the hotel. When he asked Arturo what he was going to do, the servant asked, "Would you like me to come with you, sir?" Conrad shook his head. "No, I'll be fine. I'm going to rent a horse and take a ride down to Potter's farm this afternoon." The buckskin he had ridden while he was drifting across the Southwest was being well cared for at a livery stable in Santa Fe. Conrad had paid the man for several months' care in advance, and if it was longer than that before he got back to pick up the buckskin, the man knew how to contact the law firm of Turnbuckle in Stafford and San Francisco to get more money. The dangers Conrad had shared with the buckskin while he was known as Kid Morgan had made the two of them friends, at least as much as man and horse could be. But since he had known where his quest would lead him, he had to leave the buckskin behind and would have to rely on other mounts. After lunch in a hotel's dining room, Conrad found a nearby livery stable and picked out a rangy gray gelding, renting a horse for the rest of the day, along with a saddle and tack. He mounted up and made his way out of Kansas City. It took a while because the town was so big and sprawling. Eventually, Conrad found himself following a road that ran through mostly flat farmland. Here and there, a small hill rose, and there were stretches of uncultivated land as well. He wasn't quite sure if he was still in Missouri or had crossed into Kansas. The border ran right through the area, and a swing of 100 yards as the road curved could easily mean he was crossing from one state to the other. Not that it really mattered to him which state Ralph Potter lived in. He just wanted to talk to the man. Following Crowley's directions brought Conrad to a small farmhouse with a sod roof that looked like it had been there almost as long as the region had been settled. Corn grew on the lands on both sides of the narrow lane that ran from the road for a quarter of a mile to the house. A couple of cottonwoods shaded the house itself. A barn stood behind it, along with two smaller outbuildings. Conrad saw a covered well at the side of the house. It was a nice-looking place, especially for a man who had retired from being the station master of a busy depot at one of the country's busiest railroad hubs, or for someone who wanted to live out the rest of his days in peace. Conrad ran to a halt in front of the house, and was about to swing out of the saddle when a pack of 4 or 5 huge shaggy dogs exploded around the corner of the building and charged at him in a yell and a yapping frenzy. The rented horse panicked and started to buck and rear. Conrad was a fine rider and normally would have been able to stay in the saddle, but he'd been in the act of dismounting and was thrown off balance. He grabbed for the saddle horn but missed. With a breath-robbing impact, he crashed to the ground. Instantly, the growling, snarling curs were all around him. His impulse was to reach for his guns and shoot them, but they held back, not attacking him, just surrounding and threatening him. He was glad he hadn't started any gunplay when he heard a shotgun being cocked. He glanced around to see the menacing twin barrels of a greener approaching him. What really shocked him was the person pointing the scatter gun at him. She was a beautiful girl, no more than 17 or 18 years old, with long straight blonde hair hanging around her face and down her back. She had a sweet, innocent, heart-shaped face, but there was nothing sweet or innocent about her voice as she said, "Keep your hands away from them guns, mister. I'll blow your damn head off."